Okay, so you know how some movies have a decent amount of VFX, but it's like kind of hidden, and maybe you don't realize it until later? Yeah. Ant-Man and the Wasp is the opposite of that. I took a look at some of the clips they put out showing the very crazy VFX they used, and it gave me a whole new appreciation for this super fun movie. One of the first VFX you see in the movie is a flashback to the 1980s. But instead of having like acid wash jeans and doing Rubik's Cubes or whatever, it's mostly about showing younger versions of the characters. They wanted to make us really believe it was Michael Douglas and Michelle Pfeiffer playing Hope's parents. So they de-aged them. It's not the first time Marvel has used it, but it's still hella cool to see someone get the clock turned back on them by like 30 or 40 years. And it's just a sprinkling of the cool tech they used on various characters like Ghost. More on that later. Anyway, in this clip, you can see Hank Pym, aka Michael Douglas, get turned back, or as the Marvel head of effects called it, they youngify him. See all those little dots on his face? Those aren't zits. You can see how they literally shave years off of his face. They did the same thing on Michelle Pfeiffer, making her look like she's ready to shoot The Children Nobody Wanted. And yes, that's a TV movie from 1981 that I just found when I googled early Michelle Pfeiffer movies. The next time we really get to see the killer VFX in action is a scene when the Wasp, aka Hope Pym, is fighting bad guys in the kitchen of a restaurant. They used what are called Fraser lenses. Not to get too tech nerdy here, but basically they allow you to focus on any spot you choose. With most lenses, you have to pick where the focus is, usually it's closer to the camera, and then other stuff is blurry, or you can focus on the background and the foreground is blurry. Basically, if you've ever tried to take a pic of your friends and someone is in the back of the room and looks blurry AF, you know. But these Fraser lenses make it so they can focus on literally anything in the frame. That means they can throw in crazy VFX, fight moves, and size changes, and it all still looks really realistic. This scene includes a killer sequence with a flying knife and a miniature Hope literally running along the blade. As you can see, there wasn't even a knife in the shot. The actor just did a throwing motion. Excellent mime work, my dude. And then you can see how the Wasp and the knife were added as CG. Now, it's no surprise that a person the size of a bug dancing along a knife blade was done with VFX. But I was surprised to find out even some of the food on the counters was CG. Like those tomatoes that are smashed up when the bad guy's trying to kill Hope? Totally VFX. When I heard about the VFX they used on Ghost, it was a little bit of a facepalm, if I'm being honest. Not because of anything they did, but because I figured it was a lot more high-tech than how they actually did it. Turns out they basically had the actress do a bunch of takes of all of her movements. And obviously, if you move around in the same space, you're never going to hit the same exact position twice. You'll get close, but unless you're a robot, your body's going to be in slightly different spots each time. So they essentially just chose one of them as the hero shot, aka the one where she looks like a solid person. And then they just included a ton more of them, but hazy versions of it. So it looked like she was in 20 different places at the same time. And if they saved any money with the relatively low-tech VFX for Ghost, they definitely spent it immediately on the VFX for the ants. I mean, if you call a movie Ant-Man, you're gonna want to have some real ants. In the sequel, they clearly upped their ant budget by 10 times. And it turns out the folks at Cinesite, who did all the VFX for Ant-Man and the Wasp, got to nerd out about real ants. They watched tons of ant footage to mirror how they walk and move, so they'd look right at home working in a lab. There was also the weird problem that trap-jaw ants look really smooth in real life. They would end up looking like plastic toys in the final rendering of the movie, so they had to, unsmooth them with CG. They also went above and beyond with these ants, giving them all slightly different body shapes and even different coloring, depending on how old each ant was or what species it was, or maybe how much spray tan they had put on that morning. Ants need that glow up too, you guys. Ant-Man even got a glow up towards the end of the movie, though it's more like a blow up because he became a giant. See what I did there? Anyway, Ant-Man is the size of a building, and he has to go get the miniaturized lab from Sonny Birch. For starters, there's a fun look at the lab being pulled up by strings that'll later be turned into Ant-Man's giant fingers in post. But what surprised me the most is how detailed and labor-intensive this scene was, and a lot of it was working on the water itself. I guess if you have a giant man splashing around, you gotta get the water right or it'll look fake. But check out the amount of detail. Feels like they're almost going droplet to droplet here. And then there's all the nuances of the sky and the ferry, and then putting big old Paul Rudd on the water next to the boat. They even went into a crazy amount of detail for a shot when he falls underwater. They took their time to painstakingly make the water look just as muddy and murky as it is in real life. But then when he falls in, it churns everything so much you probably would never notice that they made it accurately murky. Still, it's wild to hear about the level of detail they put in. And speaking of insane levels of detail, the quantum realm sequence came towards the end of the movie, so you know they were feeling the pressure to nail it. And you know what? I think they did. The whole point of the sequence was that Hank was diving deeper and deeper into different areas of it as he got smaller. So they not only had to make it look cool, yet somehow realistic, but they also had to create new looks for each new layer he went down into. The CG bugs were actually modeled in one of the layers after actual microbial creatures that scientists have seen in real life. And now I will probably see them in my nightmares. Thanks, Marvel. Then as he goes to the most subatomic level of the quantum layers, they were pretty much able to just go off of their imagination. Because, spoiler, no one has ever been that small in real life. The whole sequence was animated with a lighting scheme from a prism, and they were using coral reefs as another reference point. They also looked at real viruses through a microscope and copied some of the color schemes they saw. Then in the VFX, they put those colors and textures onto the landscape that Hank was moving around it. And yes, in case you're wondering, the whole scene is totes supposed to make you feel uncomfy. It worked on me, that's for sure. Do you think it's better when VFX are super obvious, like a person shrinking and growing, or more subtle? Do you ever notice when VFX are looking kind of janky? Let us know in the comments section.